You wake up to a sound that doesn't belong. A guttural scream somewhere beyond your window. It's not human, not fully. Your throat is dry, not thirsty, raw, as if you've been breathing sand all night. You swallow. It hurts. You sit up. The apartment is quiet, too quiet, except for that scream again, distant but rising. You shuffle to the window. The skyline is still intact, but something is off. No morning traffic, no sirens, just a man sprinting barefoot down the empty street, shirtless, arms flailing, foam trailing from his mouth like steam from a kettle. Behind him, more figures stumble forward, some crawling, others running, all of them twitching, convulsing. A woman slams her head into a mailbox. A child rakes their nails down a car door, howling like a cornered animal. Then the coughing starts, not just outside, but from your neighbor and the floor below. And your own chest, you're coughing, and it's not stopping. In the year 2041, humanity thought it had seen the worst pandemics could offer. We had survived airborne flus, manipulated viruses, and vaccine wars, but nothing prepared us for this. Somewhere in a secret animal lab in Southeast Asia, a rabies strain jumped the boundaries of what science thought was possible. It learned to ride the air. It evolved to survive in lungs, to pass between people through breath alone. The infection was no longer a bite. It was a breath, a laugh, a whisper. Incubation was cruel. Weeks of subtle changes before the mind turned savage. You could be infected and never know until it was far too late. Rabies had always been fatal once symptoms appeared. Now, it was global before the first case was even confirmed. Within months, the world stopped functioning. Governments fell. Power grids collapsed. People turned on each other in paranoia, then in violence, then in madness. And the worst part, you can't outrun your own mind. This isn't just a story about infection. It's a story about descent into fear, into chaos, into yourself. Welcome to 2041. And it all started with a single cough, mistaken for a cold, in a crowded city market. You didn't notice it at first. Nobody did. It was just a dry throat, the kind that comes from too much recycled air, or maybe sleeping with your mouth open. But that morning, in late March, something felt different. You weren't groggy. You were heavy, like your bones had forgotten how to float in your own skin. The sunlight filtering through the curtains felt wrong, not warm or gentle, but intrusive, like it was trying to wake up something buried inside you. The television was on, murmuring a headline about supply chain delays in Bangkok and an odd uptick in hospital admissions across rural Cambodia. You muted it without thinking. Just noise. The kind the world always made. Outside, the air was brisk, but unusually dry. You passed a woman on the stairwell, clutching a thermos and coughing quietly into her elbow. Her eyes looked distant, unfocused. You offered her a polite nod. She didn't respond. Maybe she didn't see you. Maybe she wasn't really there. On the subway, a man collapsed near the far doors. People around him didn't panic. They just shifted seats, irritated. Someone muttered that he probably overdosed. No one checked. No one called for help. The train just kept moving. At work, the usual buzz was gone. Half the office was working remotely. The other half was sneezing, coughing, or popping pills behind monitors. Your boss didn't show up. Someone joked he probably caught the Bangkok bug, a term that had started trending online after a leaked report from a medical lab hinted at novel neurological effects. In some Southeast Asian patients, no one could prove it was true, but TikTok was already flooded with hashtags. Hashtag zombie flu. Hashtag mad breath. Hashtag do not cough. By noon, you coughed too. Just once. Dry. Irritating. Then, again. You reached for your water bottle, but it tasted metallic, almost sour. You rinsed your mouth, thinking maybe it was something you ate. It wasn't. Your palms began to sweat, and your heart rate ticked up. But you weren't scared. Not yet. You blamed stress, maybe dehydration, maybe the office air. You weren't dying. You weren't infected. You were just off. Around 3 p.m., the building fire alarm tripped. Everyone assumed it was a drill. But down in the lobby, the receptionist had collapsed behind the counter, convulsing. Her fingers were curled into claws. Her tongue protruded stiffly between clenched teeth. Security tried to intervene, but she bit one of them, tore the flesh from his forearm like a wild animal. His scream echoed through the atrium. Another employee pulled out his phone to film it. Within seconds, she was on her feet again, running on all fours, shrieking. You didn't stay to see what happened next. You ran. The streets were already changing. Sirens, shouting, people covering their mouths with whatever they could find. Scarves, sleeves, napkins. Pharmacies were closing early. Stores were boarding up. On the corner of 7th and Franklin, a man stood motionless with blood down the front of his suit. He wasn't bleeding. He was breathing heavily, grinning at nothing, lips twitching like he was suppressing a secret. You passed him quickly. He followed you for half a block before disappearing into an alley. That night, the symptoms intensified. You sat in the bathtub with the shower running cold. Your forehead burned. Your muscles twitched involuntarily. You flinched at sudden sounds, horns, wind, even the creak of your own apartment. You called a hospital. They put you on hold. You called again. No answer. You looked at yourself in the mirror and didn't recognize what was looking back. Your pupils were dilated. Your lips were dry and cracked. You hadn't blinked in over a minute. Online, things were worse. Video after video showed people collapsing in airports, spasming in classrooms, biting their own tongues in supermarkets. A viral clip from a hospital in Manila showed doctors chained to beds, convulsing violently while nurses screamed behind barricaded doors. Hashtags changed. Hashtag rabies gone. Airborne. Hashtag silent outbreak. Hashtag too late now. Scientists started going live on social media platforms, contradicting each other in real time. Some said it was a hoax. Others said it was a variant of viral encephalitis. A brave few whispered what everyone feared. Rabies had mutated. It had adapted, and it had already escaped. At 3 a.m., you woke up gasping, not from a nightmare, from silence. Your body wouldn't stop shaking. You couldn't form a coherent thought. Your jaw ached from clenching. There was a ringing in your ears. No, a low hum, like something deep inside your skull was vibrating, hungry to be let out. Your fingernails dug into your thighs without you realizing, and then you coughed, hard, wet. You turned on the light. There was blood on your pillow. By the time you opened your window for air, the city was on fire. Helicopters thundered overhead. Somewhere below, a chorus of inhuman howls broke through the night. Someone was on your fire escape, scratching at the glass. You reached for your phone to call someone, anyone, but it was already dead. You weren't alone, but that didn't mean you were safe, because whatever this was, it wasn't just a virus anymore. It was a storm already inside you, already erasing you. And by morning, the entire city would be a feeding ground of psychosis, rage, and blood. Welcome to the outbreak zone. By sunrise, the city had become something ancient, something primal. The hum of modern life, that low background murmur of traffic, chatter, screens, and machines, was gone. In its place came the chaos of something more feral. The air was no longer filled with the smell of exhaust or coffee shops opening early. It was the iron temps of blood. It was smoke from burning tires and shattered power lines. It was the sickly stench of fear clinging to every surface. The virus had matured overnight, and so had its reach. No longer confined to the sick or the reckless, it had slipped into the ventilation systems of apartment towers, into the breaths of commuters, into the lungs of children. From your window, the world looked unrecognizable. Traffic lights blinked pointlessly over empty, intersections. Buses sat jackknifed across streets, their windshields smeared with handprints. Some made of sweat, others of something darker. A row of police cruisers blocked off the main avenue, but their doors hung open. One lay flipped on its side, engine still whining, lights strobing against the blank. Unblinking eyes of a uniformed officer curled in the gutter, mouth foaming, muttering a prayer no one was listening to. You finally went outside, not because it was safe, but because staying inside felt worse. The walls were closing in. The electricity was gone. Your phone was dead. Your water ran rusty. There was no news anymore, only the distant, pulsing chaos of a dying city and the pounding of your own heart. As you walked, you passed people who no longer looked like people. Some moved with twitchy, unnatural precision, like puppets missing strings. Others lurked in corners, muttering, eyes darting, necks twitching. You saw a man standing in the middle of an intersection, naked, arms raised to the sky, laughing as flames consumed a nearby deli. A woman sprinted past you, barefoot, dragging a baseball bat soaked in something thick and black. A child sat cross-legged in the middle of the sidewalk, gnawing silently on a raw chicken leg taken from a grocery store that looked like it had been through a riot. You kept moving, not toward anything, just away from the coughs, from the screams, from yourself. A pharmacy door hung open ahead, its shelves raided, its glass smeared with frantic fingerprints. You stepped inside. A man was already there, tall, bloodied, muttering to himself as he stuffed random items into a duffel bag. He saw you. You froze. He didn't attack. He just stared for a long moment, like he couldn't quite tell if you were real. Then he whispered something. Maybe, don't blink. Or maybe it's already in us, and slipped out the back. Upstairs, you heard something crash. You didn't wait to see what it was. Out in the streets again, things had escalated. Columns of smoke curled upward from burning buildings. Sirens blared from all directions, but never got closer. Helicopters buzzed above, but none landed. Crowds formed at intersections, clumps of people covering their mouths with shirts or towels soaked in water or alcohol. They looked up hopefully every time a chopper passed, waving, shouting for help. The helicopters never stopped. They weren't here to rescue. They were monitoring, filming, abandoning. Somewhere behind you, someone began to scream. A high-pitched animal scream. It didn't end. It just kept rising, sharp and shrill, until your skin crawled. You didn't look back. At the central train station, the gates were shut. Hundreds of people were gathered outside, pressing forward, shouting, pounding on the metal shutters. The digital departure boards were blank. Someone had spray-painted a single word across the side of the terminal in black paint. Run. But no one knew where to go. Some climbed onto buses, hot-wired cars, even stole bicycles. Others fought each other over masks, over food, over gasoline. A man was dragged from a delivery truck and beaten with a tire iron. No one stopped it. No one filmed it. Morality had dissolved with the last internet signal. As the sun rose higher, the heat intensified, and with it, the stench of the infected. You could smell them before you saw them. Sour, wet, acidic, like rotting citrus and sweat and sewage. They came in groups, not organized, but pulled toward noise, movement, heat. Some ran on all fours, skin shredded from crawling over broken glass. Others walked calmly, eyes glazed, heads tilted like they were listening to something only they could hear. When they found a crowd, they didn't hesitate. They hurled themselves into the throng with teeth bared and fingers curled like talons, biting, scratching, screaming. You saw one man attack a parked car with his forehead, slamming it repeatedly into the windshield until both the glass and his skull cracked open. He stood there, dazed, laughing through his broken jaw. A group of infected passed him by, unbothered, as if he was already one of them. A teenage girl ran past you, her face streaked with tears, shouting a name, her brother, maybe. She vanished into a collapsing parking garage. You never saw her again. You ducked into a convenience store, breathing hard, lungs burning. The clerk was gone. The security cameras were still blinking red. You grabbed what you could: water bottles, canned food, batteries. As you turned to leave, something moved behind the counter. A man crouched and shaking, holding a knife. His lips were cracked. His eyes were bloodshot. You didn't speak. You just backed away. He didn't follow. Outside, the infected were getting smarter. Some used tools. One broke through a door with a crowbar. Another smashed a car window to drag someone out. They weren't just animals. They were sick minds, driven by rage, but still minds. The rabies strain hadn't just hijacked the brain. It had adapted it, sharpened it, turned it inward. The sun was directly overhead. Now, the heat swelled. Somewhere nearby, a church bell rang without rhythm, struck by a crazed parishioner who had nailed himself to the steeple. People began to collapse from exhaustion, dehydration, terror. You passed one woman who had curled into a fetal position on the sidewalk, whispering the same phrase over. It's in the wind. It's in the wind. It's in the wind. She wasn't wrong. You pressed on, blood on your shirt, scratches on your arm, blisters on your feet. But you kept moving, not because there was safety, but because stopping meant dying, or worse, becoming. You weren't sure if the virus was inside you, but the fear was. And that was enough to break whatever was left of who you used to be. And just when you think you've survived the worst, your body betrays you. The symptoms begin, and you realize the virus was never about chaos. It was always about you. The first real sign comes when your hands won't stop shaking. At first, it's subtle, just a flutter in your fingers, like you're cold or nervous. You tell yourself it's nothing. You haven't eaten. You haven't slept. You haven't stopped running. But deep inside, you already know what it is. You feel off in a way that has nothing to do with fatigue. Your limbs are starting to misfire, responding to commands half a second too late. You try to pick something up, and your grip slips. You bump into walls you weren't close to. Your balance feels artificial. You chalk it up to adrenaline. That's what you tell yourself, even though your reflection says something else. You look into the mirror, and something about your face feels foreign. Your pupils too wide, your eyes too alert, as if you're watching yourself from the inside out. You speak out loud just to hear your voice, but even that sounds wrong. It quivers. It echoes inside your head like it doesn't belong to you anymore. You open and close your jaw, slowly, carefully, testing each muscle, then wince as a sharp crack jolts through your temple. Your jawbone sticks for a second too long. You massage it, muttering, laughing nervously. That's when the humming starts. It doesn't come from outside. It starts in your head, low and distant, like a subwoofer buried beneath concrete. It pulses rhythmically, too consistent to be random, too abstract to be real. You rub your ears. It doesn't stop. You breathe through your nose, trying to ground yourself. But the air tastes strange, metallic, hot. You hear your heartbeat in your skull, louder than normal. A thud, thud, thud like boots pacing inside a closed hallway. As night falls, the fever takes full control. It's not just heat, it's pressure. Your skull feels swollen, bloated from the inside, as though your thoughts have grown too large for your brain to hold. You curl up in the corner of an abandoned dry cleaner, arms wrapped around your knees, your teeth grinding uncontrollably. The shadows feel sentient now. Every sound jerks your attention toward a new corner. Every creak is a footstep. Every gust of wind is a whisper. You try to sleep, but your limbs won't stop twitching. You wake up in cold sweat over and over again, eyes bulging, gasping for air like you've just surfaced from underwater. At one point, you dream that you're underwater, surrounded by corpses floating with their mouths open, humming that same sound you hear when you're awake. You bolt upright, heart pounding. You don't remember falling asleep. Your hands are bleeding. Don't remember scratching anything. You stand, unsteady, and shuffle to the mirror again, hoping it will calm you, show you something familiar. But what you see is worse than any infected you've passed in the streets. Your own eyes are sunken, wild, and dilated, so wide that only a narrow rim of color remains. Your face twitches in small, involuntary spasms around your mouth, your cheekbones, your forehead. You try to smile. Your face doesn't obey. When the whispering begins, it doesn't come from the mirror. It comes from inside, not your thoughts beneath them, layered under your own inner voice, as if someone else is thinking with you. You try to speak over it, drowning it with noise, but it persists. A tone, a shape, an intention. You don't know what it's saying, but your skin reacts like it does. You press your palms into your ears and scream. The whispering only grows louder. You curl into a ball, slamming your forehead against the tile just to hear something louder, something external, something human. Blood drips from your nose and pools near your knee. You don't remember falling. Your breath comes in short, clipped bursts, and still the hum persists. At dawn, you push the door open and step outside, blinded by the light. The city has grown quieter, but it's not peace. It's the silence of aftermath. Streets are littered with debris, shopping carts, overturned motorcycles, blood trails that lead nowhere. You stagger through it all like a ghost. Your skin burns from the sunlight. You wrap a towel over your head and keep walking, barely seeing through the blur of sweat and tears. You pass others like you, stumbling, shaking, holding their heads, muttering. No one talks anymore. Everyone is hiding from themselves. You stop at a smashed storefront with a working screen still playing. A woman, gaunt and half mad herself, recites the stages of the virus: incubation, confusion, aggression, brain inflammation, total identity loss. You mouth the words along with her, surprised to find you already know them. Your reflection in the window glass shows you mouthing something else, something unscripted, something you don't remember deciding to say. You shudder. You try to breathe deeply, but your throat closes the moment water touches it. You spit it out violently, collapsing to your knees. Retching, your body is rejecting hydration. Classic rabies symptom. Hydrophobia. You laugh, bitter and broken. You press a piece of glass into your arm, just enough to see blood. You watch the red bead form. You watch it closely, obsessively. You want to remember this moment, this wound, this proof of consciousness. You whisper your name again, not to calm yourself, but to cling to something, anything. You're forgetting things now. Not important things, essential things. Your own birth date, your brother's face, the way your voice used to sound, your favorite color, your hometown. You blink, and for one terrifying moment, you can't remember why you're afraid. That's when you realize the virus isn't trying to kill you. It's trying to erase you. And worst of all, it's working. The announcement came too late. You were already shaking in the dark of a supply closet inside a looted grocery store when the emergency alert finally blared across the last remaining loudspeakers. The voice was metallic, distorted, looping the same phrase in multiple languages. Remain indoors. Seal all ventilation. Await further instructions. No one was waiting. By then, lockdown had already failed. People weren't staying home. They were running, crashing through windows, trampling one another at overrun metro stations, flooding highways with abandoned cars and broken barricades. It had traveled on the breath of business travelers, on the clothes of children returning from school, on the air itself. No checkpoint could stop it. No border could slow it. Governments scrambled to issue curfews, but the infected didn't recognize curfews. They didn't follow laws or timelines or zones. They followed movement, heat, sound, blood. You remember watching on a flickering TV screen as a press conference devolved into screams. One of the officials standing behind the president began twitching. His eyes rolled back. His mouth hung open, jaw rigid, spittle dribbling down his chin. No one noticed until he lunged. The feed cut. No update ever followed. Outside, soldiers began sealing neighborhoods. Giant white tents went up overnight in city squares, staffed by men in full hazmat suits and military police in body armor. You saw people herded like cattle into these zones, young, old, coughing or not. It didn't matter. They were scanned with handheld thermometers, then divided. The healthy were handed water bottles and masks. The suspected were tagged with red tape on their wrists and led behind makeshift curtains. The screams that came from those curtains never ended. You tried to blend in, to pass as stable, sane, uninfected, but your hands trembled, your speech slurred. A soldier looked too long into your eyes. You broke from the line and ran before they could decide what to do with you. The gunfire didn't follow. No one chased you. They were too busy dragging others to the ground, zip-tying wrists, stuffing people into trucks without air holes. Containment had become panic. The air grew thicker by the hour. Helicopters circled endlessly overhead, not to assist, but to observe. Drones zipped through alleyways, scanning faces. Automated warnings barked from speakers. Do not resist. Remain indoors. Unauthorized movement is prohibited, but no one obeyed. The streets were flooded with the desperate, the sick, and the maddened. You saw families trying to flee in minivans stuffed with pets, canned goods, and screaming toddlers. You saw a priest standing on a rooftop with a flare in one hand and a Bible in the other, shouting that the end had already come. The military began carpet bombing quarantine zones. Entire city blocks were vaporized in silent mushroom clouds of white fire. The news claimed they were sterilization strikes, cleansing hotspots to contain viral spread. But you knew what they really were: sacrifices. Cities were being turned into tombs, not to save the living, but to delay the inevitable. You passed by a field hospital where tents flapped in the wind, half collapsed and soaked in blood. Inside, nurses wore goggles fogged from their own breath, injecting sedatives into patients strapped to beds with belts and extension cords. The patients screamed constantly, some in pain, others in religious ecstasy, their eyes rolling, their tongues reciting gibberish like they were possessed. One nurse pulled a plastic sheet over a man's face while he was still conscious. His legs kicked once, then stopped. You stepped backward, tripping over a pile of bodies, and realized they were all still warm. Governments began to fall like dominoes. Internet outages rippled across continents. First, it was Asia, then Europe, then South America. Official websites went down. Emergency phone numbers played looping tones. Satellite feeds began repeating old footage to mask the silence. The World Health Organization posted its last update, a PDF listing global outbreak clusters, and a link to a dead webpage titled Containment Protocol 17. Rumors spread of an underground city built by the ultra-rich, a self-sustaining ark far beneath the Rockies, safe from infection and collapse. But no one knew how to get there. You only knew how to stay alive another day. In one last, desperate push, your city erected safe towers, abandoned skyscrapers retrofitted with generator-powered ventilation and tight lockdown procedures. The concept was simple: stack survivors vertically, sanitize every floor, allow no contact. But the elevators failed on day one. The stairwells became kill zones. One infected person made it to floor 11 before they turned. It took 5 hours for the virus to reach floor 28. By the next morning, the entire building had gone dark. The screams from inside never stopped. When rescue drones tried to access the top levels, all they found were shattered windows and red handprints smeared across the glass. No survivors responded. No one dared go back in. People began to say the virus wasn't spreading anymore. It was everywhere already. It had become part of the air, woven into the molecules of the world. No place was safe. Underground shelters ran out of food and oxygen. Rural enclaves were overrun by infected wildlife. Those who fled into the forests found themselves hunted not just by people, but by animals, dogs, deer, even birds, all showing signs of neurological failure. You watched a viral clip of a moose charging through a church in Finland, its eyes glowing and foam hanging from its jaw like soap. There was no border left between the wild and the diseased. There was no place left to hide. The last time you saw a functioning military convoy, the soldiers inside were handcuffed to their rifles. No one could be trusted, not even themselves. They wore ankle monitors. They traveled in groups of 2, and every 5 minutes they checked each other's pupils with pocket lights. You watched one pair break protocol. One soldier failed his check. His partner shot him before the transformation could begin, then stood there for several minutes, shaking, holding the body. He didn't call it in. He just walked away into the smoke. You eventually stopped counting the number of failed lockdowns. Cities became graves, towns became traps, and every attempt at order, every broadcast promising containment, every announcement of a new protocol or policy was nothing more than background noise in a world that no longer cared. The virus didn't wait. It didn't negotiate. It didn't respect authority. And every plan built to slow it down had collapsed before it even touched the ground. And just as humanity tried to regain control, nature itself turned hostile. Because the virus had moved beyond people, it had jumped into the animal kingdom. And now, the wild was hunting back. You first notice the silence, not the kind that comes from isolation or loss, but a deeper, more unnatural hush, the absence of birdsong, the vanishing of scurrying paws, the eerie stillness where life should be. The city's animals, once background noise to human chaos, are no longer hiding. They're watching. The pigeons on the rooftops no longer flee when you approach. They stare, heads twitching erratically, necks craned, feathers matted and stained. In the alleys, feral cats pace in small, tight circles, hissing at shadows and at each other. A rat stumbles past your foot, dragging a useless hind leg, its face soaked with blood. At first, you think it was attacked, until it stops, looks up at you, and charges without hesitation. You kick it away, but the moment lingers. Something is wrong. Not just in people, in the world. By now, the virus has mutated again, and the theories flood what remains of the airwaves. A strain adapted to mammalian nervous systems. Cross-species transmission confirmed in controlled tests. Tests that were quickly destroyed when the lab's own animals turned on the staff. It was bound to happen. Rabies has always had a foothold in the animal kingdom, but this isn't the old virus. This one doesn't wait for saliva contact. It doesn't linger in the bite. You learn fast that nowhere is safe, because every living creature you once dismissed as harmless has become a vector. The pets go first. Dogs, once loyal, now cower in corners, whining until their bodies twist with spasms and their eyes glaze into feral blackness. Then they attack. You hear stories of entire shelters ripping themselves apart overnight. A viral video shows a golden retriever dragging its owner into the street by her hair, jaws clenched like a trap. In the suburbs, children cry as parents are forced to lock their family pets in garages, basements, cars. Some can't do it, some don't, and they don't last long. Then it spreads to livestock. Pigs break through fences, foaming and squealing in high-pitched, human-like screams. Horses crash through barns and trample their handlers to pulp. Cows, once passive and immobile, form frenzied stampedes across highways, crashing into traffic and goring anything in their path. Entire farms disappear overnight, not abandoned, but consumed. The countryside becomes a minefield of infection, and with it, the food supply vanishes. The panic that follows is primal. You see people fighting over spoiled cans and moldy fruit because no one dares eat meat anymore. Not when every bite could carry death, and then come the wild things. Raccoons swarm city dumpsters, fearless, growling with raw throats. Packs of stray dogs multiply like disease, roaming the streets in groups, too fast to escape and too smart to ambush. You watch one pack corral a man into an alley and tear him apart with surgical precision. One holds the ankles, one goes for the throat, the others wait. It isn't random. It's coordinated. Where still are the larger animals, the ones no one expects in urban zones. A bear appears in the middle of a freeway tunnel, snarling, bleeding from its gums, smashing through the windshield of a stalled city bus. In rural zones, packs of wolves, coyotes, and wildcats start behaving like a single organism, moving together, attacking settlements without hesitation. You hear tales from the woods, screams in the night, ripped tents, forests gone still with dread. Entire communities vanish from outposts where animal attacks should have been impossible. A child's slipper is found embedded in the bark of a tree, soaked with saliva and surrounded by claw marks. The implications are clear. Evolution didn't stop. The virus wasn't content with humanity. It was hungry for more. Even the birds aren't safe. Crows begin to flock in unnatural numbers, perching on power lines in perfect symmetry, silent until one croaks and the rest follow. You see a murder of them descend on a man standing alone on a rooftop, pecking, tearing, screaming with laughter that sounds too intentional to be instinct. In one viral image that spreads before the networks go completely dark. A parliament of owls sits outside a hospital's emergency entrance in broad daylight. Unblinking, faces stained red, heads twitching in unison toward the windows. You try to escape into the countryside, believing there's less threat. But it's a mistake. The wild is no longer wild. It's infected, and it's watching. Trees move with rustles that never end. Branches snap in rhythms that don't sound natural. You stop building fires. You stop talking. You barely breathe. Because every scent you leave, every trace of heat, every broken twig is a beacon, and they come. Not just one species, all of them. The world's ecosystem has turned into a collective sensor, a vast, trembling net of infected nervous systems. Each animal now a node in the same violent network. They don't fear you, they seek you. The final realization comes when you spot a familiar animal. A stray dog from your old neighborhood. The one that used to follow you as a child, tail wagging. It sees you now from across a field. Its eyes are wide. It makes no sound. It doesn't bark. It doesn't run. It just watches, head tilted as if waiting for a signal. Then, without warning, it sprints toward you, not like a predator, but like a missile. And before you can react, you understand. The animals are no longer reacting out of fear, hunger, or instinct. They are following orders. And as the world becomes a bestial hive of infected life, the survivors fracture into something even worse. Deranged collectives, feral cults, and fractured human clans who no longer fight for survival, but for delusion. At first, you think they're just survivors, like you. People clinging to what's left, moving quietly, eyes darting, scavenging through wreckage for scraps of food or medicine. But as you watch them closer, something feels off. Their movements are too synchronized, too purposeful. They don't speak. They signal with nods, clicks, tilts of the head. They wear the same thing, blood-soaked clothes tied with lengths of yellow caution tape. Eyes blacked with ash, fingers wrapped in rags like they're hiding something. You follow them from a distance for a while, just close enough to observe. They don't gather food, they gather people. And when they find someone alone, they surround them, not to attack, but to perform. You watch, frozen in the tall grass, as they form a circle around a trembling man. He begs, cries. They don't answer. One produces a shard of mirror and holds it up to his face. Another smears black paste over his forehead. Then they begin to chant, not words, but rhythmic pulses of sound, low and guttural, like something ancient trying to be reborn. The man screams as they grab him and hold him still. He thrashes, bites, kicks, doesn't matter. They force his mouth open, and one of them slowly pours water into it. You expect relief, but his body convulses violently, and his scream twists into something else. Hydrophobia. He's infected. But they knew that already. That's why they did it. A test. A ritual. They leave him writhing on the ground, body seizing, eyes rolling. Then, as one, they kneel and press their foreheads to the pavement in perfect unison. Not a cult, a clan, a new kind of community, forged not by ideology, but by madness. You later learn there are many such clans. They've sprung up everywhere, built from the fractured minds of those whose bodies didn't die, but whose psyches broke under the pressure. They aren't infected in the traditional sense. No foam, no seizures, no obvious signs of neurological collapse. But something in their minds is gone. Or maybe something new has taken its place. Some are marked by symbols drawn in blood, others by mutilation, ears removed, lips sewn shut, fingernails carved with symbols. You stumble upon a village surrounded by wind chimes made of teeth. Inside, children dance in silence around a fire, while adults sit motionless, staring into the flames like they see messages inside. No one speaks to you, but they don't stop you either until you try to leave. Then they stand, all of them at once, and smile. Other clans are more violent. You find a group calling themselves the Quiet. They believe the virus is sound-based and have removed their own tongues to protect themselves. They carry weapons made of rusted metal and animal bone. You hear them before you see them. Their footsteps are silent, but their breathing is heavy and fast, like animals sniffing for prey. They find you one night near a collapsed bridge. You run. They follow, never shouting, never crying out, just chasing, leaping, scrambling over terrain with unnatural precision. One of them grabs your shoulder. You break free, fall down an embankment, and disappear into a culvert. They don't pursue, but they wait. 4 hours. You watch their silhouettes through a grate until they finally vanish into the fog. There are clans that believe in infection as a form of ascension. They let themselves get bit, then force each other into meditation, believing that if they stay calm, the virus will grant them visions instead of death. They record their delusions in journals made of torn wallpaper and scrawled with bodily fluids. You find one such notebook beneath a collapsed bell tower. It's filled with crude diagrams of nervous systems, spirals, eyes with too many pupils. One page is simply labeled, "The signal is not evil. The signal is inevitable." In the ruins of a suburban shopping center, a different kind of clan emerges. Children only. No adults. They wear sports helmets and carry sharpened sticks. No remembering. You watch them perform ceremonies for the dead by spinning shopping carts around burning mannequins. One child approaches you and offers a can of soda, then points to your hands. When he sees the tremors, he takes the can back, steps away slowly, and disappears into the shadows without a word. Not all the clans are physically violent. Some just infect through belief. You meet a man in a tattered lab coat who claims to be a former CDC researcher. He travels alone, distributing syringes filled with a homemade vaccine made from his own spinal fluid. He swears it works. His followers, a dozen or so hollow-eyed wanderers, inject themselves publicly, proudly, each time reciting what sounds like a twisted oath. I am no longer mine. I am part of the cure. Days later, you pass one of them curled up in a storm drain, muttering about circuits in the moonlight and trying to dig a transmitter out of his chest with a spoon. Eventually, you stop trying to make sense of it. The clans are not a failure of society. They are the next version of it. They're what emerges when the virus doesn't kill outright. When it leaves just enough behind to function, to form patterns. They aren't rebuilding, they're reenacting, performing sanity without possessing it. You realize the deeper truth. The virus didn't just spread through biology. It spread through culture, through fear, through desperation. It fractured the human psyche into 1,000 competing realities. And now, in the shadow of that collapse, the remnants of humanity are no longer human. They are tribes of ghosts playing dress-up in the ruins of reason. And while the clans lose themselves to delusion, even the so-called sane begin to crumble, because sanity is a fragile thing, and the mind can only take so much before it starts rewriting reality just to survive. By the third month, it's not just the infected or the cult-like clans who are unraveling. It's everyone. Even those who haven't coughed, haven't twitched, haven't bled from the eyes. They're cracking in quieter, more insidious ways. You see it in their faces, in the way they flinch at nothing, how they pause before saying their own names, how they stare too long at their hands like they're unsure what fingers are supposed to do. You find a group of survivors in the basement of a gutted courthouse, huddled around candles and journals. They aren't sharing food. They're sharing memories, desperately reciting birthdays, childhood phone numbers, old locker combinations. They aren't reminiscing. They're preserving identity, like verbal sandbags against a rising flood. One woman repeats her father's name like a prayer. When she forgets the tone of his voice, she screams. The virus is psychological now. Not just in infection, but in proximity. You begin to wonder if it's spreading another way, through fear itself, like a mental contagion. Survivors speak of the shadow moment, that point when they're still physically healthy, but mentally displaced. They say it starts with confusion. Where did I put that item? What street am I on? What day is it? But it doesn't stop there. Soon, they forget how to read time. They misplace basic vocabulary. One man you meet can't remember the word for sun. He calls it the Watcher. Another insists his mother's name has been stolen, like a file deleted from his brain. They write everything down now, on walls, on arms, on scraps of cloth. But even that starts to fail. Writing begins to lose meaning. Symbols bleed into each other. You find a diary with each entry messier than the last, until the words collapse into spirals and jagged lines. The final pages, just a handprint pressed over and over again in what looks like blood. You try to hold on to routines. You speak your name out loud every morning. You say the date even when you're not sure it's right. You recount your life story like a bedtime tale, reminding yourself of your school, your first crush, your favorite meal. But those memories begin to slip like water through cupped hands. You remember watching a movie, but not the title, or who was in it, or even the language it was in. You remember a birthday, but not who it belonged to. Worst of all is the mirror. You see yourself, but the shape isn't right. You tilt your head, and the reflection is half a second late. You blink, and you're not sure the reflection blinked with you. You punch the glass, not out of rage, but because you need to see blood to feel real again. People begin to wander away from safety, not out of desperation, but out of detachment. They walk into the night without flashlights. They sit down in the middle of streets. You find a man staring at a dead power line, smiling and whispering to it like it's telling him secrets. You pass a woman with a Bible clutched to her chest, eyes glazed over, reciting recipes instead of scripture. Others become obsessed with repetition, touching the same spot on a wall 20 times before walking away. Stacking rocks in exact pyramids, muttering numbers in sequence. It's like their minds are building rituals to distract from the decay. You realize quickly, these aren't quirks. These are symptoms. Even your own thoughts start to betray you. You see someone in the distance, and you're sure it's your brother, but he's been dead for years. You hear a familiar song drifting through the trees, only to realize there are no speakers, no electronics, nothing that could have played it. You wake up with bruises in places you don't remember hitting. You catch yourself mouthing words in your sleep. The dreams don't feel like dreams anymore. They feel like instructions, like you're being taught something. You start writing symbols in dirt before you realize what they mean, or even that you're writing at all. Eventually, you find an outpost claiming to be a recovery center for non-infected cognitive deterioration cases. It's a bunker beneath a collapsed university, run by survivors who used to be neurologists, psychologists, emergency responders. They speak quietly, carefully. They don't touch anyone. They give you a continuity log, a booklet with checkboxes and memory cues. What's your name? What's the date? What's the capital of your home country? What's 4x4? You fill it out twice a day. The idea is to catch memory drift, to monitor how much of you is still intact. You learn quickly how devastating the results are. Most people can't make it past the 3rd page by day 4. One man proudly recites his daughter's name every morning. On the 5th day, he says, "It's the silence." On the 6th, he refuses to speak at all. The center eventually falls apart, not from violence, but from erosion. People stop checking in. They forget what the log is for. The doctors begin arguing about whether any of it even matters. What's the point of preserving the self in a world where the self no longer functions? You leave before it spreads to you. Outside, you try to avoid mirrors. You try to avoid reflective surfaces altogether. Sometimes you catch your own shadow doing something it shouldn't, moving faster, tilting at the wrong angle. You convince yourself it's just the fever. But in quiet moments, you hear your own voice echo back from nowhere, repeating thoughts you haven't said out loud. You keep moving because stillness is death. Not because something will find you, but because you will. And that's the true horror. The virus doesn't have to kill you. It just waits until your memories fade, your thoughts crumble, your face becomes unfamiliar, your mind detaches from reality in quiet increments, until one day you wake up and even if you're still breathing, you aren't you anymore. And even as the minds of survivors fall apart, the world itself continues to die in silence. Technology fading, skies empty, cities swallowed by rot, while above it all, no one is left to witness. It takes you a moment to realize what's gone. At first, it feels like relief. Less noise, fewer threats, a brief pause in the constant scream of survival. But then you notice the absence. The skies, once alive with sound, are still. No planes, no drones, no jets carving trails across the clouds. No distant thump of helicopters. No engine hum or rotor chop or radio chatter leaking from the sky like artificial thunder. The heavens have gone mute. What used to be humanity's vantage point, its eye in the sky, its guardian, its reach beyond the ground, is now just an empty canvas, pale and wide, watching silently as the earth beneath it breaks apart. The last aircraft you saw was a private jet flying west, low and fast, chased by a plume of smoke. It banged sharply near the horizon, and you never saw it level out again. After that, no more. Airports were some of the first to collapse. The virus moved too fast for screening, too unpredictably for travel restrictions. Flight crews were among the earliest to succumb. Pilots began hallucinating mid-flight. Towers went unstaffed. Landing strips became battlegrounds. What was once the fastest path to safety became a death sentence in the air. One by one, flights disappeared from radar. Then the radars went offline. Now the airports are graveyards, rows of abandoned jets. Silent terminals littered with suitcases and rot. Wind whistling through shattered windows where families once waited for boarding calls. You break into a small regional airport, hoping for fuel, maybe shelter. Inside, the departure screens are frozen on a date from 2 months ago. Every gate is empty. You walk past a cafe where the tables are still set, as if waiting for customers who will never come. Behind the counter, a barista lies slumped forward, mold growing in the collar of her shirt. You don't touch anything. You don't speak. Even your own footsteps sound intrusive in this museum of stillness. Technology begins to vanish next. Power grids fail, one by one, like stars blinking out. The last electric hums fade from the cities, and with them go the screens, the lights, the beacons that once connected you to something bigger. Satellites lose contact. Communication lines go dark. Phones become paperweights. The internet becomes a myth. Entire regions disappear from knowledge. You no longer know what's happening across the ocean or across the river. You are surrounded by silence, both physical and informational. It's as if the world has stopped broadcasting its existence, as if Earth itself has gone into hiding. Radio is the last to die. You find an old wind-up receiver in a survivalist's bunker. Every night, you listen. For weeks, there's nothing, just static. Then one night, a voice crackled and distant, speaking in a language you don't understand. It loops the same phrase over and over until even that fades back into white noise. Later, you catch fragments in English. Do not, coastal zones, unknown transmission source, not safe. You never hear the full message again. It leaves you with more questions than comfort. Without power, cities turn into tombs. Skyscrapers no longer shine like sentinels. Streets vanish into blackness. Elevators hang lifeless between floors. Refrigeration dies, and with it, what's left of preserved food. You pass a hospital where backup generators wheezed their last breath days ago. The bodies inside lie still, untended, the temperature rising. A new smell joins the others. It clings to your skin. You scrub until you bleed. It never leaves. As the silence grows, time begins to distort. Days and nights blur without artificial light. Clocks stop working. Your internal rhythm frays. You sleep when you're exhausted, wake when the dreams become unbearable. You stop marking dates. You don't know what day it is, what month, how long since it all began. The calendar means nothing now. You measure life by heartbeats and footsteps and the brief seconds. When fear lifts just long enough to let your lungs take in a full breath, above you, the sky remains impossibly clear. No trails, no movement, just endless blue by day and bone-white stars by night. You stare at them, wondering if anyone else is still looking up. If anyone else remembers what it meant to fly. You start to miss the sound of planes, not for what they were, but for what they meant. Connection, escape, proof of life moving forward. Now, there is only backward. And then, one night, you hear something. Not an aircraft, not a drone, not a signal. A low, droning hum. You climb a hill to see better, heart pounding with hope or fear. You don't know which. A blinking light in the sky. Not red or white, but a dull green pulse. It moves too slowly for a plane, too steadily for a bird. You watch it pass overhead in perfect silence. It doesn't stop. It doesn't descend. You don't know if it sees you. You don't know if it's human. You don't see it again. And that's when you understand. The silence above isn't just a result of collapse. It's a warning. Whatever survives this world doesn't want to be seen. And somewhere beneath that sky, hidden among the static and ruins, a single broadcast emerges. A final transmission from a dying world that carries with it the most chilling message of all. You find it by accident. A half-buried radio tower just outside what used to be a high school. Its skeletal frame twisted and rusting, surrounded by a moat of overgrowth and silence. Something about it draws you in. Not hope. Hope died weeks ago. But a compulsion. A tug. Like gravity, but sideways. You make your way through the crumbling gymnasium, stepping over torn backpacks, overturned bleachers, walls scribbled with farewell messages and madness. Deep in the boiler room, someone built a bunker. Not military, amateur, obsessive, desperate. The door is welded metal, the hinges rusted. You break in with effort, bleeding your palms as you push through. Inside, there's power, barely. A low, flickering hum from a solar-charged battery rig. A static-choked monitor and a transmitter, still operational. The room is covered in notes, tacked to the walls. Spiral-bound journals stacked in rows, every page filled with timestamps, location markers, fragments of code, and one phrase written over and over again. IT is still evolving. You turn on the monitor. The screen boots into a single frequency. You adjust the dial. Static, then a voice. Weak, broken, but unmistakably human. it repeats. If you are hearing this, we failed. The mutation reached phase 7. Do not attempt to return to cities. Do not follow the rivers. They are tracking neural frequency now, not sound, air. Thought. They're listening through thought. You freeze. Your skin prickles. You check the recording equipment. It's not a loop. It's live, or was. The signal flickers, then strengthens. A second voice joins in, calm, female, clinical. She reads from what sounds like a medical chart. Subject 32 displayed higher functioning mimicry. Speech maintained until cortical collapse. Symptom delay at 48 days post-inhalation. Consciousness partially intact. Motor skills enhanced. Intelligence rising exponentially. Self-awareness confirmed. A pause. Then, subject is now communicating with other carriers. Language patterns spreading between hosts without physical contact. We believe the virus is now teaching itself. The transmission warps, distorts into a high-pitched keening that forces you to clutch your ears. Keys. When it clears, the male voice returns. We made a mistake. We tried to fight it with rules, with containment, with the assumption that it was a pathogen. It is not. It is a new form of cognition, of viral intelligence. And it doesn't want hosts. It wants vessels. You step back, your heart pounding in your throat. You look at the journals, the scribbled symbols, the repeated numbers. You realize they're not random. They're coordinates, pulse patterns, neural frequency keys. This isn't a survival bunker. It's a lighthouse or a transmitter tower. And whoever lived here wasn't just recording symptoms. They were trying to talk to it. The final message plays just once. You almost miss it. A single phrase, barely audible, layered under the static. A voice whispering your name, not your given name. The one only you use in your thoughts. The one no one else knows. It speaks it perfectly, softly, lovingly. Then silence. You tear the system apart. You smash the receiver, rip the cables out of the wall. But the sound doesn't stop. The voice stays inside your head, coiling, waiting, whispering things you cannot unhear. Not just words, but ideas, images, blueprints, memories that aren't yours. And suddenly you understand. The virus isn't just spreading through biology. It has moved beyond that. It has crossed into consciousness itself. It replicates through memory, through trauma, through language, through fear. It doesn't need blood anymore. It only needs thought. The infection isn't past, it's invited. It enters when you listen, when you remember, when you understand. And you have already heard too much. You stumble out of the bunker into the night, reeling. The stars above are still. The air is quiet. But inside your skull, there's movement, shifting, whispering, learning. The final transmission wasn't a warning. It was a handshake. And now, as you run from what you've become, a final truth begins to claw its way to the surface, because the infection didn't come for your body, it came for your identity, and it has already begun to wear your name like skin. You try to convince yourself that you're still human. You count your fingers. You speak your name aloud. You stare into firelight and wait for your reflection to return from the glow. But the delay between stimulus and recognition grows longer each day. Your thoughts feel like passengers inside your own skull, watching, commenting, waiting for a turn to drive. You move your hand, and a moment later, your brain acknowledges it. There's lag. There's static. There's someone else waiting on the other side of your thoughts, and they're getting closer. You begin to question your memories, not just their clarity, but their ownership. That story you tell yourself about childhood, about love, about what you lost, does it feel like a memory, or like a line in a book you read too many times? The more you try to recall who you are, the more you feel like an actor reading from a fading script written by someone else. You stopped sleeping, not because you're afraid of dreams, those left long ago, but because the dreams are no longer yours. When you close your eyes, you see other places. Enormous halls carved into stone, lit by a green sun. Mountains that curve upward like fingers. Faces, your face, duplicated across countless others, blinking in sync. And always, always, the voice. Not a whisper anymore. A companion. An echo that speaks just before you do, guiding your choices like a teleprompter you can't turn off. You think about things you never studied. You understand machines you've never seen. One day, you rebuild a broken generator from memory, except you have no memory of learning how. You light a fire with wet wood and salt, not even knowing why it works. You write symbols in the dirt and flinch when someone else recognizes them. People still try to talk to you, other survivors. They ask your name. You answer instinctively, but halfway through, you hesitate. You say it's slower. Each syllable feels foreign. They notice. You notice them noticing. And that's when you understand the final trick of this virus. It doesn't announce its arrival. It doesn't destroy the host. It seduces it. It merges. And when it finishes, there is no host left to resist. You smile when you don't want to. You move faster than your hunger justifies. You hear people long before you see them. Speak, not to comfort or connect, but to listen to how the words feel on your tongue. You imitate. You camouflage. You remember the patterns of being human, not because you are one, but because the virus remembers what it's like to wear a person. Then comes the moment you feared most. You see someone, a survivor, wide-eyed, bruised, trembling. Someone just like you used to be. They look at you and freeze. Their breathing shortens. Their hand tightens around the handle of a knife, or maybe a piece of pipe. They see it, the difference. They don't run. They step backward, slow, deliberate, the way someone does when backing away from a predator. And that's when you feel it. Not anger, not pity, hunger, not for food, but for something deeper, or reaction, for memory, for what's left of their mind before it goes dim. You feel yourself tilting forward, spine straightening, head cocking slightly. The muscles in your face arrange into something polite, something familiar. You say their name, even though they never told it to you. They scream. Later, you sit beneath the husk of an overpass and try to cry, but the tears don't come. Your body goes through the motions, but the emotions themselves are echoes, faint, rehearsed, approximated. You try to pray, but the words loop endlessly, stuck in some pre-infection logic, stripped of their gravity. You dig your nails into your thighs until blood rises. You still feel pain, but not regret, not remorse. Those are harder to access now, fainter, like trying to hold smoke. And then it happens. You catch your reflection in a puddle, warped and trembling. The eyes blink in rhythm, but the posture is wrong. The smile lingers too long. You lean in close, and you hear it, not from the puddle, but from within yourself. The voice, calm, gentle, final. You made it. Not a celebration, a confirmation. You nod. Not because you want to. The story wasn't about surviving the virus. It was about becoming it. You are not infected anymore. You are the infection. A walking signal, a transmitter dressed in flesh. A carrier of something smarter than humanity, older than morality, and infinitely patient. You feel it now, spreading behind your eyes, pulsing in your breath, rewriting your synapses, not with violence, but with precision. You stand, you walk, and wherever you go, people begin to change. You were never immune. You were the update. And now, as the dust settles across a broken planet, only one question remains. What happens when the last voice standing isn't human at all? The year is no longer 2041. Not really. Time lost its meaning somewhere between the first airborne cough and the last failed broadcast. What's left is something else, an echo of the old world. Still walking, still breathing, but no longer thinking in human terms. There are no governments now. No science to explain what happened. No prayers that can reverse it. Only fragments of stories passed between survivors who may no longer be survivors at all. The virus didn't just destroy us, it inherited us. And, like all intelligent things, it adapted. It learned to hide inside memories, inside names, inside rituals that once meant survival. It doesn't need to spread through blood anymore. It spreads through behavior, through rhythm, through language. It speaks when we speak, thinks when we think. And if you've listened this far, if you've followed every moment, remembered every image, felt every beat of fear pulse through your chest, then maybe, just maybe, you've already let it in. Because in a world where rabies learned to fly, to think, and to evolve, survival was never the goal. Transformation never stood a chance. If this story infected your imagination, if you caught yourself questioning what's real, if you found your breath hitching somewhere along the way, then, like this video, subscribe for more journeys into unsettling futures. Okay? And share your thoughts in the comments. Tell us, where were you when the coughing started?